Well, now I want to move to somebody who's new that hasn't been on the show before, Paul Panache. And when I first met him, he has something that he does. It's called up close realism, and it kind of intrigued me because I've always been curious about how people detail their scenes and what they use and so forth. So, Paul, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Paul has a video that he is going to run for us. And then after you've seen it, he'll be glad to answer any of the questions that you may have about what he calls his up close realism.
Thank you. My name is Paul Pollansch, and I'm a museum model builder specializing in dioramas, as long as people will pay me to do them.
Can you turn the volume up?
I'm looking to do.
You don't have space for it yet. And a diorama is a really good way to do part of the layout in limited. And you could even put it into the larger layout later. And if you want, you can make the diorama its own thing. It'd be a standalone art piece. And I know people don't think of dioramas as art so much, but I think that's because a lot of dioramas that get made are boring. You really don't want to be boring when you're doing a diorama. It's a whole lot of work. You need to come up with an idea that excites you and excites other people, because you're not just making it for you. I mean, I know it feels that way sometimes, but the best dioramas are made for everybody. So the important thing here is coming up with an idea. As a matter of fact, the three most important things about the diorama idea is the idea, and the idea. Seriously, I mean, if you don't have a good idea, it's not worth doing, because it's a lot of work to do one of these things. And especially if somebody's paying you, get them to do a neat thing, not a boring thing, because it costs about the same to do a boring one as a neat one. So do a neat one. What you need to do is come up with a concept that really excites you and let your excitement go into that model. And then people who see the model will be excited, even though they're not into the stuff you're into necessarily. If you do it right, if you have a story, if you have a concept and you're clear, you can reel people in. So come up with a really cool idea and be excited yourself about it, and that'll really help make the model real to other people too. So think of things that would work in a layout, but think of things that would work along with a layout. Like, you don't have to have stuff that's even inside of the rails. Like, how about a fire? This is a picture of a building that's having a wall collapse, and they caught the moment just when that piece of wall was coming off. It would be really great to put a diorama, because you can conceal the supports that hold that piece of the wall away from the rest of it. The smoke shows the movement, and you can put lights in it. I mean, the lights would sell this model all by themselves. But it'd be even cooler if you could put people in it, show firemen struggling with the hoses because they're really hard to move around with that high pressure. And of course, show a group of dejected former occupants of the building standing there outside the fire line barrier tape. I mean, there's a lot of story in here, so you've got to get the story across. Also, if you have something that's a little bit unusual, you need to show why it's cool, why it's unusual. Compare it to something normal that people understand. As long as people get the context, they'll be reeled in. It's kind of like a good joke. You got to set it up. You have to get them thinking the right way, because even if you think that way automatically, they won't. So you need to get them thinking like you. So get their nerd on and have them going, and then they'll get the joke. Another cool thing you can do is show a building at the edge of the layout with a wall missing. So you're looking into the building. The edge at the building is right where the wall was missing. And you could show a machine shop working on locomotives. You also could think about other buildings, like here's a picture of a mixed-use building where one wall is missing. You can see all the activity going on in all the different rooms. And you could take that further. You could make it an apartment building, and every apartment has a missing wall, so you can see something going on in every apartment. And you could expand on this even further by having a whole row of buildings, and each one of them is missing a wall right at the edge. So there's a lot of possibility for stories in there. And also think of ways that you can easily blend the finished diorama into the layout. Like you could have something like an old-fashioned log drive in whitewater, and that's perfect for blending into a bigger scene because the logs themselves and the whitewater are easy to blend into more logs and more whitewater. So you get the idea, and you can see the poses in these guys are pretty dramatic too. So that's the sort of thing you should be thinking of for your diorama idea. Okay, you have your killer idea, now it's time for research. I bet you're thinking, oh boy, yeah, wow, exciting. But it's not that bad. Just use Google all at first and find out as much as you can about your subject. And I know you're already an expert, but you'll find out more stuff that you need for the diorama anyway. And then of course go to images to get your images. And you'll notice that some images are labeled differently in different sites. Like the same image will show up with different labels, and then it's your job to figure out which image is labeled right. So you can do this by being in your image search and finding an image you like and clicking on it to find out more about that image, and you'll find out where that image is all over the web. And then when you look them up one by one, you'll get a consensus about what it is. Yeah, you could always run into a million Frenchmen couldn't be wrong situation, but it's more likely that the majority of the identical IDs will be right. But I'll leave that up to your own judgment. Don't ignore other sources of information. Videos are great, blogs are great, listservs. Anywhere anybody's talking about your subject is really helpful. And also, when you do the all search, you'll notice terms specific to your subject, which can also be search terms. Those really help. So run searches on them too, and you'll find even more stuff, because not everybody tags everything. And so it's a matter of luck sometimes to find that image of the back. Okay, you've got your idea, you've got your research, and now it's time to make the thing. So first thing to think about is viewpoint, and of course composition. You want to consider how the viewpoint is going to affect your story. Like if you want to show that something was really big, you need a low viewpoint and ideally something to compare it to for scale. People are really good for this. You show a person dwarfed by some huge thing, that's really helpful. But if the viewpoint is low anyway, the viewer is already looking up at this huge thing. The composition is something you have to play with, because your original concept may not work because you put elements together in mock-ups and move them around and say, oh yeah, I really can't see what I want to see with this, so I need to move this here, that there, or I need to even cut this thing that I was married to. You really have to be ruthless. The only stuff that's allowed to be in your diorama is what helps get the idea across. So if you have this cool thing that's just gratuitous, a cool thing has to go away. You have to have another cool thing that's important. So also consider foreground objects helping frame your scene or draw the viewer in. If they only distract, they have to go away. So I'm not saying you're only cutting stuff here. I'm just saying make sure everything in your model is working to get the idea across. And then once you've figured out what all has to be in there, then compose it in a way that it's pleasing and that it actually helps get your idea across. And then you can figure out how big to make stuff, how many things to include. Another thing to remember is diagonals generally are more interesting than straight on. So if you have stuff at an angle, it usually is more interesting. And don't forget that you can add a sound and light. There's a company called Engineering that makes ready-made light effects with LEDs. They have little controllers that they sell you. They've got one for campfire, they got one for welding, flashes, all sorts of stuff. And of course you can make your own. You can get an Arduino board and make your own controller. I've never done it, but I know it's use for both lighting and sound and movement too. If you're really brave, you can put movement in there. Just make sure you allow for maintenance because stuff breaks. Human interest is really important. Of course, putting people in the dioramas is always helpful, or at least implying that they're there. You can be clever and have a scene where people just left and it's obvious that they were just there doing something. It's really neat when you actually have figures in there. And remember those dejected people I told you about in the fire scene? Well, to do that, you would need to show them with their shoulders a little bit hunched and their heads a little lowered and maybe their backs a little bent. And that would, you might not find a stock figure that way, but whatever the pose is, you want to find examples of it to use as reference. And you can find them, they don't even have to be exactly the subject you're doing. As long as the motion is the same or the attitude is the same, it'll work. So find something that works with your scene and use that as a reference. And you can even get a friend to strike this pose or strike it yourself and get yourself photographed doing it. They're so flexible. They're so much better than the artist's minute. Okay, you have your killer idea, you have your research, and now it's time to build the thing. So the first thing you got to work out is the composition, because that's really what sells this. Think about the viewpoint, think about how it's oriented to the rest of the layout or just to its box. If you want to show something that's really big, you want to have the viewpoint really low so people look up at it, and have something in there for scale, like a person or some piece of equipment people are familiar with. Diagonals seem to be better than
and do that.
Diagonals seem to be better than straight on. It seems they're more interesting usually. And when you're working out the composition, use a mock-up. Don't have your pieces already built already, because you may not even build all the pieces you thought you were going to put in there. The mock-up helps you understand just how this all works, and you find out what to cut, what to leave in, and try not to be too affectionate toward different elements, because sometimes they just don't do the work, and you have to say, sorry kid, you're cut from the team. Maybe next year. It's got to all work for your concept. It's got to all help. You can't have things obscuring other things that are important. So anything that obscures something important has to go. But you can play around with it with your mock-up, and you can also think about foreground elements. How could they frame the scene? Are they helping pull the viewer in? All that stuff. And don't forget special effects like sound and light. There's a place called Engineering that makes ready-made LED control boards to do effects like campfires and welding equipment. They even have sound devices in there. And you don't want to be limited by sounds that people sell ready-made. You can get really good audio off of YouTube videos. You can use a software made by a company called Media Human to pull the audio off of a video. And so this could be really great, because somebody could have shot a video that has sound, the very sound you need, and there it is, and you just take it right out, put it in your model. Adding people is really good. It's cool sometimes if you can add evidence of people, like you can have a scene that clearly was just occupied by people, but they've left. But it's always neat to have actually people in there. So get the figures in there, and remember those people I mentioned who were in the diorama for the burning building? Well, you could show a lot of action there with the figures. You could show the firefighters struggling with the hoses to keep them steady while they're blasting this high pressure water and stuff. You could show the people at the edge all dejected, and you show them with the pose. Lower their heads some, and you can, when you're working with figures, we're usually using small scales. Only if you're in O scale or bigger can you really show facial expression. So everything has to be with body language. So you need to get the pose right. And luckily we have a working knowledge of what poses are right, just existing in our world. But one thing's really helpful is to get one of these new artist mannequins. They're so much better than the old ones because they are more posable and they have interchangeable hands. I got one right here. And what I'm doing,
Cut. Hold on. Stay there. You just okay. Action.
I've got one right here. He is posed as an archer, and it's okay, but it's not really quite right. I can see some problems with this where it doesn't seem very realistic, it doesn't seem terribly expressive. But if I just do subtle things, I can make more tension. Like he's really, really going to shoot that thing right through the castle wall. I did very little difference, and I got a whole lot more tension in it. And if you work with these, you'll see what I mean. You just play around with it until it just feels right. So once you get the thing you want, you just leave it there and say scale figure to look just like this. And I've put some wax in here for transitions, but you get the idea. And so here is where wire and super glue are your friends. You cut the joints apart and you drill holes in the different members to accept wire, which then becomes your new joint. And then you can pose it until it looks like this, or whatever your pose is. Then you put super glue in the joint to make it permanent. And then you spray it with the accelerator so that it doesn't move. And then you can carve it. Make sure you carve it with a really, really sharp knife because this stuff is brittle. And of course, if you're working in scales smaller than O, you're going to have to just cut the limbs apart and not use the wires and position them until they're about right. And then,
So, are you good with that tape?
so get lots of extra figures because it's really easy to mess this stuff up, especially in small scales. But if you can alter the poses to be like the pose you want, you'll get a whole lot of expression out of your figures. And it's really worth doing. So there will be links published for all this stuff because I know I went kind of fast. And that's pretty much it for now. And I'll just close with this little bit of life advice. Don't sweat the petty things and don't pet the sweaty things.
It's a dog.
Paul will be doing these in 15-minute segments for the next couple of weeks for us to continue this. Does anybody have any questions on what you saw in this video?
I would like to add for the Q&A that a bunch of the pictures didn't get into the film. I'm sorry about that. Could I share my screen and show
Sure.
one or two of them?
Absolutely.
This is the burning building, and you can see it's amazing. I don't know who took this photograph, but I'm indebted to him or her. So now you see what I mean about that wall falling down and how you could conceal the supports for the broken piece with all that smoke. And just imagine people in there too. And let's see, there was also...
The fire scenes have always fascinated me because
Yeah.
I first saw it in the military modelers posts that they do, because they have some of the airplanes on fire and so forth. You know,
Oh yeah.
Literally falling out of the sky. And the scene that you just showed, I think, is fantastic because you don't see that kind of thing on a model railroad normally.
That's true. And I wanted to show also the machine shop. That would have been a really cool fourth wall model. I mean, here they've hoisted the entire engine up in the sky. I mean, I know that's most of you know about that, but when I saw those, and there are a bunch of pictures like this in machine shops all over the world. Apparently, this is just what they do. But can you imagine having a welding flash effect off to one side and hearing all the noises? I mean, engineering actually offers tape of recording of a reasonable sounding machine shop. It's pretty amazing.
Huh.
But and there was one last one I wanted to show you, um, the idea for the loggers that wasn't really clear, but this is the, where am I? Boy, I'm not used to working on two screens here. Here we go. This is a close-up. They're actually not really, they're actually marking the logs, but they're doing they're doing the, did I actually share that?
Yes, you
Yeah.
did.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, good. But you can see I mean, the poses are pretty dramatic, and you can see the water churning around, so it wouldn't be too hard to blend it into a larger scene.
Yeah.
And there was one other shot showing a log drive that I wanted to stick in there, and that is, come on, show me. There we go. There we go. And
Huh.
yeah, so you can see they've got a jam up there and they're trying to break it up. When I was looking at this part, there was footage of a guy using dynamite to break logs apart from about 15 feet away. I thought, are you out of your mind? That's the kind of story that I was thinking of. And that was really the main missing part. The fourth wall idea was pretty well expressed. And believe me, that's not my idea. I saw that in another model making book for model railroads, but it's really good. I mean, when you just take that wall away, and it's the easiest thing to blend into another layout, is you just pick the whole building up and stick it in there. Okay, I'll shut up and allow for questions if there are any. I know this is going to be kind of an odd thing, so I'm not sure anybody's going to have any questions. But,
Well, Paul, I can't thank you enough for taking the
Well,
time to do this tonight, and look
thank you.
forward to you continuing this scenario next week.
Thank you, Jim. I'll see if I can come up with some worthwhile material next time too.
Thank you so much. We
Okay.
certainly appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. All right.